You're listening to Midnight Crime Stories, where every whisper carries a shadow, and every night holds a darker secret. It started with a sound. Not a scream, not a shout, just a voice. A voice too soft for the wind to carry, but too close to ignore. January 13th, 2022, 7:48 p.m. Temperatures had dropped to -14. Snow blanketed the small town of Pine Hollow like a memory no one wanted to touch. And near the edge of Carter Lake, a woman jogged alone, earbuds and hood-up breath curling in the frost behind her. Her name was Valerie Kent, 32, local schoolteacher. She ran this trail every Thursday night. But that night, she didn't finish the loop, because that night, halfway around the frozen lake, she heard something, a voice delicate, distant, coming from beneath the ice. "Help, please." She stopped, yanked out her earbuds, looked around. Nothing, just the crunch of snow beneath her shoes and the vast white sheet of the lake still as glass. She took a step forward, listened again, then closer now, a whisper. "Don't leave me," Valerie screamed. Detective Raymond Marshall hadn't been to Pine Hollow in over 15 years. When he first came here in the winter of 1994, the lake had taken a girl named Lucy Amber. Or, at least that's what the town told itself. Her body was never found. No blood, no signs of struggle. Just gone. Swallowed by the cold. Back then, Marshall had been 29, fresh out of academy, still believed in neat endings. But Lucy's case never made sense. And what haunted him wasn't just the mystery. It was Lucy's last voicemail. He had played it maybe 50 times back then. The last words she left her mother before she disappeared. "I'm going down to the lake. Don't worry. I won't go on the ice. I think I heard someone calling me." Click. Nothing more. Marshall sat behind the wheel of his car parked along the same trail that wrapped around Carter Lake. The snow was thicker now, deeper than he remembered. It pushed against the tires like it didn't want him here. He looked down at the file in his lap, Valerie Kent's missing persons report. Her footprints had led up to the lake's edge and stopped. There were no signs of a struggle, no animal tracks, no broken ice, just nothing, exactly like Lucy Amber. Except this time the lake had been frozen solid for weeks, thick enough to hold a truck. So how did she disappear? Detective Marshall looked up. Officer Blake, 23, eager and far too green to be standing in this cold. "Sorry to bother you," Blake said, rubbing his gloved hands together. "But we finished canvassing the area. Nothing new. The drone didn't pick up any heat signatures either." Marshall nodded. "What about audio?" Blake hesitated. "We pulled some wildlife mic recordings from the Park Service. They pick up ambient noise around the lake. There's one clip. You'll want to hear it." He handed over a flash drive. Later that night, Marshall sat alone in the local precinct's records room, the only place still quiet enough to think. The radiator hissed beside him. The lights buzzed faintly above, but his focus stayed on the laptop screen. The audio file opened, time-stamped January 13th, 7:46 p.m. At first just wind, snow crunching. A bird's distant call. Then, "Help!" His hand froze on the mouse. The whisper was faint, almost lost beneath the static, but definitely human. Then another, "Please don't leave me." And then a third voice, lower, more guttural. Not quite a whisper, almost a growl. "She's mine now." Marshall sat back. The lake hadn't given up its secrets, but it had started whispering again. Lucy Amber had been 16. Brown-haired dimples, violinist. The kind of girl you'd see in a school play center stage, beaming. Her disappearance had rocked the town. That winter search party swept the entire lake and surrounding woods. Her parents passed out thousands of flyers. Volunteers drilled into the ice every 10 feet, dragging sonar scanners, dogs, and divers. Nothing. No jacket, no shoes, no scarf. Gone as if the ice had opened for her and then closed again. Marshall still remembered her mother's face the day the search was called off. She didn't cry, she just whispered, "She's still there. I know she's still there." The next morning he walked the lake. Snow crunched beneath his boots. The wind tugged gently at the edge of his coat, and out on the ice, white, perfect, seamless Carter Lake looked like a blank page no one dared to write on. He stared out across it. Something about the silence here felt heavier than it should. Then just as he turned back toward the trail, a crack. Sharp. Sudden. Behind him. He spun around. Nothing there. But for a moment, just a breath, he swore he saw something beneath the surface. A shape. Elongated. Faint. Almost like someone drifting just under the ice. He didn't speak. Didn't move. Just watched. Then it was gone. And once again, the lake was still. That night in his motel room, Marshall pulled out a box he hadn't opened in over a decade. Inside Lucy's case files, photos, audio tapes, and a single worn cassette CD labeled L.A. Final Message. He slid it into an old player, pressed play. Lucy's voice came through soft, young. "Hey, Mom, I'm just heading to the lake. It's beautiful tonight. Don't worry. I'll be careful." Pause. "I thought I heard someone calling me. I think someone needs help." Click. End of message. Marshall stared at the recorder. It was almost the exact same wording as Valerie Kent's last known audio. Was it a coincidence, or was someone mimicking the victims? He needed more than hunches. He needed sound. So he drove late into the night to the edge of town to a man known only as Radio Joe. Joe lived in a shack of antennas and wires. Old radios stacked to the ceiling knobs and dials glowing like fireflies in the dark. Everyone thought he was crazy, but Joe had ears like sonar. Marshall knocked once. The door creaked open. "Back already?" Ray Joe grinned toothless. "Or did the lake call you too?" Marshall stepped inside. "You still monitor local frequencies." "Always. Static is a kind of prayer, you know. You just have to listen long enough." Joe pulled a chair beside a worn receiver. "What you want to hear?" Marshall slid over the flash drive. "Play this. Boost the gain. Cut the wind." Joe nodded. Fingers flew across knobs. Seconds passed. Then, the whisper returned. "Help!" Joe froze. "Wait. That voice," he whispered. He reached over, pulled a second tape from his own archive. Time-stamped January 12, 1994, the day before Lucy disappeared. He hit play. The same voice. "Please, don't leave me." Joe whispered, "Ray, they're the same girl." Back in his car, Marshall sat in silence. A girl vanished in 1994 after claiming she heard a voice near the lake. Another vanished 28 years later after hearing the same voice. Both captured on audio, both impossible, unless someone was orchestrating it. But who could replicate a voice from the 90s? Who had that technology then? And why? As the wind howled outside and snow drifted across his windshield like static, Marshall leaned back in his seat and whispered to the dark, "What are you hiding beneath the ice?" In Pine Hollow, they say if you stand on the lake long enough, you might hear them whisper back. But don't listen too long, because some voices were never meant to return. Detective Raymond Marshall wasn't afraid of the dark, but there was something about the Pine Hollow Records room that made it different. It wasn't just the chill that settled into his bones, or the scent of old paper soaked in time. It was the sense that the walls remembered. Every unsolved file, every closed case without closure, the air was thick with what was missing. He slid the heavy drawer open. The Amber Lucy case folder creaked as he pulled it free. The label was slightly faded now, like the name itself had been trying to disappear. He didn't let it. Inside the folder, everything was just as he'd left it. Photos, statements, the official missing persons report. But as he flipped through, something odd caught his eye. A sealed manila envelope unmarked, not even Lucy's name on it. He didn't remember putting it there. He opened it. Inside was a cassette tape. And a post-it. One word written in pen in a hurried, almost childlike scrawl, "Don't play this after dark." Marshall stared at it. Then he laughed, but it was a hollow, breathy thing. Of course, someone had to try and scare him. Small town. Old legends. People playing games. He inserted the tape into the old recorder on his desk. The machine clicked, at first static, then a soft hum, and then something that made the hair rise on the back of his neck. A melody. Off-key slow, almost like a child playing a music box from memory. And then a voice. "I'm still here." Marshall's hand trembled slightly over the pause button. The voice was female. Young. Not screaming. Not crying. Just sad. He pressed pause and sat back. He needed to see Lucy's mother. Helen Amber lived just outside town. The house hadn't changed since Marshall's first visit nearly 3 decades ago. Same picket fence, same wind chimes that never seemed to move. She opened the door before he knocked. Her eyes looked older, but her posture hadn't bent. There was steel in her spine, the kind only mothers of the missing ever developed. "You heard her too," she said quietly. Marshall didn't answer at first. Helen turned and walked inside. "Come in, I've got tea, though I doubt you're here for it." The living room was neat, untouched by time. Photos of Lucy still hung along the hallway. School portraits, summer vacations. She'd be in her 40s by now, Marshall realized, but every frame held a girl forever 16. "I never stopped hearing her," Helen said, pouring the tea. First it was dreams, then it was the voices. At night, in the walls. Marshall watched her closely. "I thought it was grief," she continued, the mind making noise to fill the silence. "But then other mothers started hearing things too." "Other mothers?" he asked. She nodded. "Not all of them, just a few. Girls who vanished long before Lucy. And they all heard the same thing." She walked to a drawer and pulled out a stack of yellowed notes, letters, diary entries. Each one had lines underlined in pencil. "I can still hear her under the lake. She sings when the snow falls. There's a girl in the ice. She won't stop calling." Marshall flipped through, breath catching slightly. "How far back do these go?" he asked. Helen placed a finger on one of the older notes. 1948. Later that night, he drove back to the station with the tape still playing in his mind. "I'm still here." He didn't sleep. Instead, he reached out to the local audio forensics lab. A friend. Discreet. Skilled. He sent a digital rip of the tape with one request. "Tell me what's buried in the background." By noon the next day, she called back. Her voice was shaky. "Ray, what the hell did you send me?" He leaned forward in the diner booth. "Just tell me." The voice is real. Young female. But there's something underneath it. Frequencies that don't belong. Like what? Like feedback. Deliberate distortion. It's layered, not analog. Too clean to be old. But not digital either. And here's the weird part, there's another voice embedded. What do you mean embedded? Not over it. Inside it. Like someone merged 2 voices into one. They bleed into each other. One says, "I'm still here." The other says, She paused. Marshall waited. She won't leave." Marshall hung up. Hands cold. He thought back to Joe, the radio man. Static is a kind of prayer, he'd said. But maybe it was also a prison. And someone or something had been trying to speak through the bars. He didn't go back to his motel that night. Instead, he returned to the edge of Carter Lake. Parked, waited. Let the silence wrap around him, like a blanket soaked in ghosts. Midnight passed. At 12:17 a.m., a faint sound came through the radio in his cruiser. At first he thought it was a bleed-through from another channel. But it wasn't music. It was a lullaby. Soft, uneven, broken. Then the voice again. "I'm still here." And then suddenly, like a rush of wind across dead snow, "She won't leave." And for a single second, the radio hissed. And then it laughed. Not human, not whole. A laugh made of pieces. As if someone had cut up recordings of laughter and stitched them back together wrong. Marshall shut the radio off. His hands were trembling now. Not from fear. Not exactly. From understanding. The voice, the one on Lucy's tape, hadn't come from her. It had become her. And now it was happening again. The next day, Marshall requested access to the original search logs from 1994. He went to the storage depot deep in the town archives. Everything was still on paper. He found a folder labeled Lake Sweep Logs Week 2. Inside, the names of every diver and operator. And one name caught his eye. Jonas Merrow, search and rescue team leader, last assigned to the Western Ice Trench sweep. Except that sweep never happened. Marshall had been told back then the team found nothing. But according to the logs, Merrow never submitted a report. And beneath the sheet, paper clipped loosely, was a page with notes scribbled in pencil. Water too cold to explain. Divers reported strange noises under the ice. One claimed a hand brushed his leg. No visual confirmation. Merrow called off search early. Claimed ICE was speaking. Marshall's pulse quickened. He flipped through the folder. No contact info for Merrow. No forwarding address. Just a blank line under status resigned, January 16, 1994. 2 days after Lucy vanished. He drove straight to the address listed on Merrow's old personnel file. It was now an empty cabin, half swallowed by snow. He knocked once, twice, nothing. Then, a voice from inside, low, gravelly. "Go away." Marshall leaned toward the door. "Mr. Merrow, I'm investigating." The door creaked open. A man stood behind it. Late 70s, maybe older, eyes sunken, skin pale. He looked like he hadn't seen sunlight in years. "I know why you're here," Merrow said. His voice was hollow. "I know what the lake takes." Inside the cabin, the fireplace burned low. Merrow didn't sit. He stood by the window looking out across the woods. "She came to me," he said, "the night after the search." "Knocked on my window?" Lucy Marshall asked. Merrow nodded slowly. But she wasn't right. She didn't speak, just pointed to the lake, then vanished. Marshall tried to hide his reaction. "You believe you saw her?" "I know I did, but she wasn't alive." He finally turned. "It's not the water that takes them. It's what's beneath it. Something old. Something that learns." Marshall's voice dropped. "Learns," Merrow nodded. "From them. From their voices. Their pain. It collects it. Builds it. Then sings it back." He walked to a drawer, pulled out a battered cassette tape. "Listen to this, but not here. And not alone." He handed it to Marshall. "After this, you'll understand." Marshall took it. "What's on it?" Merrow looked at him dead serious. "It's her." As he stepped back into the night, snow began to fall again, light, gentle, like static from the sky. He didn't look back at the cabin, because in the silence behind him, he swore he heard the faint sound of Lucy humming from beneath the frozen earth. Some tapes shouldn't be played. Some voices aren't meant to be heard. And some songs never stop. The tape sat in Marshall's coat pocket like a heartbeat. He hadn't dared listen to it. Not yet. Not alone. But the weight of it, the implied warning in Jonas Merrow's eyes, clung to him all the way back to town. Snow fell harder now. Thicker. Like the sky was slowly erasing the world. He drove in silence. No music, no radio. Not after what he'd heard before. Inside the precinct's records room, the air was heavier than usual, like the walls had leaned in to listen. Marshall slid the tape into an old player, one of the last analog machines still tucked away in the corner. Its gears groaned to life. The hiss of old magnetic film filled the room. Then the voice. Not Lucy's, not exactly. It was like her, but stretched, distorted in places, gentle in others. Like someone trying to remember her and getting it almost right. "I'm still here," the voice rippled across the speakers. "Under the lake." Then, silence. And then something else. A second voice. Lower, male, but faint. "She's waiting." Marshall stopped the tape. The room felt colder. He rewound it, played it again, slower this time. He caught something in the background. A click. Then another. Like a switch being flipped. Then the voice repeated. "She's waiting." But now it sounded different, as if someone else was speaking through the recording using the girl's voice like a shell. He scribbled a note. Signal or mimicry. New presence detected. He needed help. Real analysis. He drove to an old friend. Talia Reyes, ex-FBI, now retired sound engineer. She lived alone above a bookstore 2 towns over, her place filled with recorders, wave meters, and reel-to-reel machines that looked like they belonged in Cold War bunkers. When he knocked, she answered in a bathrobe, glasses perched on her head, and a cup of coffee already halfway gone. "Ray," she said, voice scratchy. "Didn't expect you in this decade." "I've got something," he said. "I need your ears." She stepped aside. "Then bring it in. But if it's a ghost, I'm charging double." The room smelled like dust and vinyl. Marshall handed her the tape. She studied it like it was a fossil. "Where's this from?" "Long story," he muttered. She popped it into her machine, ran the audio through a processor, and began watching the waveform on screen. Seconds passed. Then she frowned. "Something's wrong with this track." She zoomed in on the waveform. "There's a secondary pattern. buried behind the voice. She played it again, slowed, then isolated the second track. What came through wasn't a voice. It was a rhythm, not music, not speech, a pulse, like something breathing slowly but mechanical. "Ray," she said quietly, "this was made recently." "That's not possible," he replied. "It's from 1994. She looked at him. "No, it's not. This kind of layering didn't exist in the 90s. Whoever made this knew how to encode hidden sound beneath an analog voice print. That tech didn't hit until at least 2011. Marshall stared at the waveform, his throat dry. What if it wasn't made? What if it evolved? Talia blinked. "What are you talking about?" He hesitated, then told her everything. They sat in silence for a moment. Talia stood up, walked to her bookshelf, pulled out a dusty binder. "I've seen this before," she said. She opened it. Inside, reports. Old ones. Declassified documents from the Cold War. Pages of redacted field notes from a government program called Vox Echo. Back in the 70s, she explained they were experimenting with acoustic weapons. Sound that could induce hallucinations, trigger emotions, even mimic voices from a subject's memory. She flipped to a diagram, a circular graph with concentric rings. They believed sound could be alive, that frequencies could carry intent, even intelligence. Marshall narrowed his eyes. "You're saying the voice on that tape could be—" She looked at him. "Something that learned how to speak by listening to others." They stayed up most of the night. By dawn, Talia had isolated a fragment buried under the primary voice. It wasn't words. It was a sound pattern like coordinates. She mapped them onto a spectrogram. The result a shape, an outline of Carter Lake, and inside it, a symbol. Rough, crude, but to Marshall it looked like a mouth. Back in Pine Hollow, he stopped by the radio tower. It had been decommissioned years ago, abandoned, like most analog infrastructure. But the town hadn't torn it down. It still loomed above the trees like a rusted skeleton. He pushed the door open. Hinges screamed. Dust swirled in the morning light. Inside, old equipment. Broken monitors. Shelves lined with unlabeled tapes. He opened one drawer. Inside, dated logs. Broadcast recordings. 1994 through 1996. He pulled the one marked January 14th, 1994. Slid it into a machine. Hit play. At first static, then music. A classic country station. Then at 2:17 a.m. the signal warped. The music twisted. A new voice emerged. A girl's voice. "I'm still here." Marshall's stomach turned. It wasn't a live broadcast. It was a replay. The tower had been broadcasting the same voice over and over for years. A loop of sorrow, of pain. A loop that learned how to hide in frequencies. He searched the rest of the tapes. January 21st, February 2nd, March 10. Same voice, same phrase. "I'm still here." The pattern was irregular but precise, and when he mapped the dates, they aligned. With disappearances, one every decade, always during winter, always near the lake. Marshall stood in the center of the room surrounded by tapes whispering the same girl's voice in different forms. And suddenly, he understood. The voice wasn't haunting the lake. The voice was the lake, or something beneath it, using tape, frequency, memory, to call, to mimic, to feed. That night he sat in his motel room listening again to the original 1994 tape. He replayed Lucy's voicemail, over and over. Each time the voice felt closer, more aware. At 2:17 a.m., he paused at mid-sentence, then slowly reversed the track. What came out made his breath freeze. "She's not Lucy." And then static. Then laughter. Not human, not joyful. Laughter like cracking ice. He turned off the machine, pulled the tape out, stared at it, and whispered, "What are you?" Somewhere in the cold wind outside the chimes began to move. Even though the air was still, sometimes the dead don't speak. They echo. And the lake, it listens, until it becomes the only voice left. There's a sound the lake makes when it's about to crack. Not loud, not violent. It's almost like a sigh, as if the water beneath the surface is exhaling, letting go ever so slowly. And in that moment between silence and fracture, if you're listening close enough, you might hear someone else breathe too. The dive team arrived just after dawn, their breath clouded in the frigid air. The lake shimmered, still sealed in ice, almost 6 inches thick. Marshall stood at the shore watching them work. A single red tent had been pitched over the cut hole in the ice, its canvas snapping gently in the wind. 3 divers suited up in thick neoprene-insulated dry suits, face masks, double tanks. The lead diver's name was Jules. Ex-military. Quiet. Focused. Marshall liked that. Depth, Jules asked. 17 feet to bottom, Marshall replied. Visibility will be bad. But we're looking for any remains bodycloth metal. Anything not supposed to be there. Jules nodded once, clipped on his mask, and descended into the black. Underwater, the lake was silent. Not peaceful, just empty. No fish, no movement. Just shadows moving where no light touched. Jules' flashlight cut a narrow cone through the darkness. Silt drifted like frozen dust. His breathing echoed in his ears, slow, mechanical. Then, at 12 feet, he saw it. A hand. Pale. Human. Pressed against the underside of the ice. On the surface, Marshall's radio crackled. Got something, Jules' voice said. Left quadrant, 10 meters from entry. Looks like a hand. Female. Marshall's stomach dropped. Then static. And then, wait, it's moving. Inside the tent, the dive monitors flickered. The second diver leaned forward. Did he say moving? Marshall pressed the headset closer. Jules, repeat that. You said the hand is static. Then Jules again. Low. Unsteady. It's not real. I think I saw silence. Then a burst of bubbles on the surface. The line went dead. 10 seconds passed. Then 15. Marshall ripped open the tent and shouted, "Pull him up!" Now. The recovery team yanked the tether line. The cord reeled back, quickly snapping with urgency. And then Jules surfaced, mask gone, eyes wide. He gasped, coughing, clawing at the edge of the hole as they dragged him out of the water. Marshall knelt beside him. What did you see? Jules blinked. His lips were blue. I don't know. Marshall's voice sharpened. Was it a body? Jules shook his head slowly. It looked like one. A girl. Staring straight at me, but he paused. There was something else behind her. Later that day, Marshall reviewed the dive cam footage. The screen showed murky water, slow drifting silence. Then a flash, a hand. Pressed against the ice, skin translucent. Then, a face. Eyes open, pale, lips slightly parted. It was Lucy Amber. It had to be. And just behind her in the blur another face, too large. Out of proportion, mouth far too wide, as if smiling. And then the footage glitched. The feed cut out. The screen turned black. Then static. Then just barely the whisper. She's mine now. Marshall turned off the monitor. The room felt smaller. His hands trembled, not from fear, from rage. Someone or something was playing with them. And whatever it was, it didn't want to stay hidden anymore. That night, Pine Hollow's emergency dispatch center received 5 separate calls, all from different households, all reporting the same thing. A phone ringing at exactly 2:17 a.m., no number displayed, just static on the other end. And then in a young girl's voice, "Can you hear me?" followed by a click. Marshall visited one of the callers, an older woman named Nancy Teal. 78. Retired librarian. She was pale, shaken. "It was Lucy," she whispered. Her voice. I recognized it. She used to come to the library after school. She always hummed that little tune. Marshall's heart skipped. What tune? Nancy walked to a drawer, pulled out an old cassette player, pressed play. A soft lullaby drifted out. Uneven. A child's memory. Then, the same voice. "I'm still here." Marshall's blood ran cold. "Where did you get this?" Nancy swallowed. "She left it on my porch. Last night." He took the tape back to Talia Reyes. She analyzed the waveform again. "This is different," she said. "How? It's expanding. Like it's growing. The frequencies are evolving." Marshall watched as the sound data pulsed across the screen like a living thing. "It's not just mimicking voices anymore," she added. "It's replaying memories, synthesizing them." Marshall whispered, "Why?" Talia looked at him. "To make you listen." Back in town, strange things began to happen. People reported hearing whispers near frozen ponds. Children said they saw a girl standing under the ice. Phones rang at odd hours, always with static. Always followed by a single line. "She's not yours anymore." Marshall visited Lucy Amber's old high school. He found her locker still there untouched for decades. Inside books, a violin case, and a folded note. He opened it. I didn't go into the lake. It came for me. He returned to the motel exhausted. But that night he dreamt. He was standing on the lake moonlight reflecting off the surface. A girl stood beneath the ice staring up at him. Lucy. Her mouth moved, but no sound came. Then, a crack. The ice split, black water surged up, and from the depths, a hand reached for him. He woke up gasping, but his hands were wet, freezing, and beside the bed, his boots were soaked, as if he'd walked through the lake in his sleep. Not all drownings happen in water. Some happen in silence, and some begin with a whisper that never ends. He said he hadn't spoken in over 20 years. Not to police, not to neighbors, not even to God. But the voices at the lake had gotten louder. And now, they were whispering his name. His name was Ellis Boone, 81, blind in one eye, lived in a trailer that hadn't moved since 1973, set deep in the woods just off Miller Creek Road. Locals called him the Hermit. Said he used to be a custodian at Pine Hollow High. But what no one knew or remembered was that Ellis had been near Carter Lake the night Lucy Amber vanished. And for the first time since then, he wanted to talk. Marshall knocked 3 times. The door creaked open. Ellis stood in the shadows, his breath rattling like something half buried in gravel. "You come about the girl?" he rasped. Marshall nodded. "Lucy Amber." Ellis blinked slowly, one eye cloudy, the other sharp, watchful. "I saw her that night." Marshall's voice was barely above a whisper. "Why didn't you say anything?" Ellis turned. "Because I saw what took her." The inside of the trailer was dim. Smelled like oil, old paper, and pine. A small TV flickered in the corner, turned to static. Ellis didn't seem to notice. He moved to the table, picked up a faded notebook, and opened it to a page covered in black ink lines. Shapes, swirls, loops that didn't quite form letters. "I tried to draw it," he said, "but it never comes out right." Marshall sat across from him. "Tell me everything." That night in 1994, Ellis had been drinking. Parked his truck at the edge of the woods by Carter Lake. Said he liked to watch the fog roll in over the ice. Around 2:00 a.m. he saw movement. A girl? Lucy, walking out onto the lake, alone, barefoot. Ellis knew it was wrong, too cold, too late. He got out, called to her. She didn't answer, didn't even look, just kept walking slow, like she was listening to something beneath the ice. Then she stopped and started speaking. Not shouting, just whispering. To someone or something below her feet. And then she knelt down, placed her hands on the surface, and smiled. Ellis swallowed. "That's when I saw it." Marshall leaned in. "Saw what?" Ellis's eyes trembled. "The shadow." He described it as long, not human, moving under the ice fast, gliding like it didn't need to swim. It circled beneath Lucy like a predator watching. And then the ice cracked. But not loud, not like thunder. It cracked inward. Soft, precise, like a breath being drawn. Lucy didn't scream. She just sank. And the ice sealed itself. Perfect. Seamless. Ellis ran. Never told anyone. Not until now. Because now, the voices had come back. "They whispered to me," he said, "through the trees, through the snow. I hear her humming. At night. In my walls." Marshall sat in silence. "Then you said you tried to draw what you saw." Ellis nodded. "Where is it?" He got up, slowly limped to the back room, and returned with a wrapped bundle cloth soaked in age. He unrolled it. Inside dozens of sketches. A girl's face. Eyes open underwater. A long, faceless figure drifting behind her. A cabin half buried in snow with wires strung from the roof into the ground. Marshall froze. "Where is this?" he asked, pointing to the cabin. Ellis met his gaze. "I'll show you." The woods behind Miller Creek were thick with silence. Ellis led the way, flashlight barely cutting through the darkness. Snow crunched beneath their boots. After 20 minutes, they stopped. And there it was, the cabin. It sat half sunken in the frost, hidden behind a veil of pine. Its roof bowed inward. Windows boarded shut. No sign of life, but something about it watched. Marshall stepped up to the door. The handle was iced over. He pushed gently. It opened with a slow, aching groan. Inside darkness, and then the smell. Wet wood, metal, and something sweet. Like rotting perfume. He stepped in, and the floor creaked, like something shifted beneath. The cabin was small. One room, a single table, a shelf of notebooks, and a chair facing the corner as if someone had been waiting. But what stopped Marshall cold was what hung on the far wall. Photos, rows of them, clipped on wires like laundry. Girls, dozens of them, different eras, different ages, always winter, always alone. Some he recognized. Some were missing persons from neighboring counties. And in the center, Lucy Amber. Her photo was larger, newer. And it wasn't a school portrait. It was taken through glass, like from beneath ice. On the table, a reel-to-reel recorder sat humming. Still running, he pressed stop, then play. Static, then a voice. She hears you now. Then another. She's underneath you. Then, humming. Low. Familiar. The same lullaby. In the corner, a trap door, locked with chains. But as Marshall stepped closer, the humming got louder. Not from the tape, from below. He didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, he took every tape, every photo, every notebook, and called in a team. When they returned the next morning, the cabin was gone. Collapsed overnight, roof caved in, trapdoor buried under snow and rubble. The only thing left standing was the recorder. Still humming, still warm. Back in town, strange reports continued. More static calls, more sightings. But one stood out. A young girl 8 years old claimed she saw a woman smiling up from under the lake. When asked to draw her, she handed over a picture of Lucy Amber. Marshall now believed the truth was older than Lucy. Older than Pine Hollow. Something beneath the lake had been using voices, faces, even memory to lure, to feed, to become something more. And now, it had built a chorus. Not just Lucy, but every girl it had taken, all speaking in whispers, from beneath the black ice. Some witnesses stay silent, because the truth whispers back. And some cabins were never meant to be found. Thank you for listening to Midnight Crime Stories. Subscribe for more whispered true crime tales to accompany your sleepless nights. The past doesn't sleep in Pine Hollow. It lingers, in boxes beneath floorboards, in ink-stained journals no one reads, in books that haven't been borrowed for 50 years. And in the hush of the town's old library, the past was about to open its eyes. Marshall pushed open the glass doors just as the wind began to rise. The Pine Hollow Public Library was near silent as always. Its heaters hummed softly beneath the floor. Dust floated through shafts of amber light like lazy ghosts. Behind the desk stood Agnes Calloway, 92, hair like fog, eyes like polished stone. She'd been the librarian since before most of the town had electricity on every street. She didn't look up when he approached. "You've come about the girls," she said, as if reading from a page she'd known forever. Marshall didn't flinch. Yes. Agnes slowly reached beneath the desk and pulled out a thick, leather-bound ledger. Its spine cracked, its edges torn with time. She slid it toward him. "Start with page 43. It wasn't an index. It was a pattern. A handwritten list of names with dates beside them. All winter months. All 10 years apart. 1954. Each line bore a girl's name. No return, no recovery. Just a note in red ink beside everyone. Carter Lake." Marshall's mouth went dry. "Why 10 years?" he asked quietly. Agnes nodded toward the ceiling as if the answer hung above them. "Because that's how long it takes for the lake to forget, and for the town to lie to itself again." She turned and walked to the back where a locked door led to the archive vault. She hadn't opened it in decades, but now her hands found the key like they'd never forgotten. "Come," she said. Inside, old blueprints, parish records, microfilm reels stacked like bricks, and in the farthest corner, a wooden crate stamped 1901. Marshall brushed off the dust. Carved on the side, Bellhaven Sanatorium. Carter Lake Site B. He opened it. Inside were photos, hand-drawn maps, notes written in old medical script, and one faded schematic of the lake itself. Except it wasn't just a lake. It was built. "What is this?" Marshall whispered. Agnes held the map up to the light. Before Pine Hollow was founded, this place was a quarantine zone. Marshall leaned in. Quarantine. Agnes nodded. There was a facility beneath the ice. A research outpost. Something about memory therapy. They said it was closed in 1902. Said it flooded. She paused. But the lake wasn't natural. It was man-made. Poured over what they couldn't burn. Marshall stared at the sketch. It showed a tunnel, a narrow shaft running beneath the lake bed, and a chamber, labeled only Vocal Observation Chamber, Deep Echo Unit. It was never just water. It was a vault, and whatever was in it hadn't drowned. It had learned. Later that night, Marshall sat in his motel room floor littered with maps, tape reels, and files. He pieced together the dates. The disappearances weren't random. Every 10 years, same week, same temperature patterns, always a snowstorm, always around 200 to 2017 a.m. The lake didn't just take. It signaled. He reached for the old radio scanner Joe had given him. Tuned it to 145.600 MHz, the channel used by Carter Lake's old emergency beacon. Static. Then a click. Then a whisper. "She remembers you, Ray." Marshall froze. No one else had called him Ray in years. Except one person, Lucy Amber. The next morning, he visited the Pine Hollow Memorial Cemetery. Lucy didn't have a grave, just a plaque. Flowers wilted beneath it, frozen in place like memories that refused to rot. Marshall knelt. "I know you didn't go willingly," he said quietly. "I know you're still trying to speak." A breeze stirred behind him. Not cold. Warm? Wrong. Like breath from beneath the ground. And just as he stood, the metal plaque clicked, shifted. He brushed snow from its base and found something underneath. A cassette, wrapped in wax paper, with a note. "She speaks in threes." He took the tape straight to Talia Reyes. She played it, amplified it, split the channels, and there it was. 3 voices. First, Lucy. "I'm still here." Second, another girl, older. "Tell them the water lies." Third, a whisper neither of them recognized. Distorted, deep, wet. 3 is not enough. Talia looked up slowly. "You know what this means, right?" Marshall nodded. The lake didn't just take. It wanted more. He went back to the library. Agnes was waiting. He showed her the tape. She listened, eyes closed, lips trembling. And when it ended, she whispered, "It's waking up." Agnes walked to a shelf and pulled down a journal bound in cracked leather. Yellowed pages inside. She opened it to the final entry. "We tried to seal the chamber, but the voices persisted. Even after water rushed in, even after sedation, the echoes returned louder. They say they come through dreams now, through static, through daughters." Marshall whispered, "What the hell were they doing under that lake?" Agnes's eyes met his, trying to trap a voice that never belonged to this world. That night the wind howled harder. Phones rang across town, static burst from old TVs, and in 3 homes, 3 girls went missing. Same time, same trail, same lake. The lake was no longer feeding. It was calling. Some places are built to bury the past, but the past doesn't stay buried when it learns to whisper your name. The snow started falling just after midnight. Soft at first, like feathers settling, but it thickened quickly faster than forecast. By 1:02 a.m. it was a whiteout, and by 2:17 a.m. 3 more girls were gone. Pine Hollow had always feared the lake, but fear is quiet. It waits until the storm gives it a voice. Marshall hadn't slept. He stood at the edge of Carter Lake, coat drawn tight, breath turning to ice in the air. Police lights blinked red and blue in the trees behind him. Search teams were moving in patterns. Dogs barked, radios clicked, but the lake remained silent. Flat, white, innocent, like it hadn't just taken 3 lives. He opened his notebook, flipped past Lucy, past Valerie Kent, past the forgotten names Agnes had shown him. 3 new names were scrawled at the bottom. Riley Marks, age 10. Isabel Grant, age 13. Mia Flores, age 8. 3 girls, 3 whispers. He walked the shoreline retracing their footprints from the last confirmed sightings. All 3 had been near the Western Trail. All 3 had vanished at 2:17. Just like Lucy, just like the rest. Then in the snow, a new trail, half faded, already filling with powder. He followed it, through trees, through wind, through a silence so deep it began to hum. And then he saw it, the radio tower. It hadn't broadcast in over a decade officially, but someone, or something, had kept it alive. He approached slowly. The antenna stretched upward like a skeletal finger piercing the storm. Snow clung to the walls. The door hung slightly ajar. Inside it was warm, too warm, and the lights were on. The first room was filled with static. Old analog equipment blinked lazily. Tapes spun. Meters ticked. A low hum filled the space, rising and falling like a breath. On the desk, a reel-to-reel recorder paused mid-play. Marshall pressed play. The whisper filled the room. "She's not sleeping." Then a melody. A lullaby broken warbled. He stopped the tape, turned, and saw a hatch. It was built into the floor metal, rusted but not locked. He opened it. A staircase descended into dark, and the whisper grew louder. He moved slowly. Each step creaked like it hadn't been touched in years. The air grew colder, then strangely warm, thick, almost wet. At the bottom, a hallway. Stone. Narrow. Carved into the earth. How deep did it go? He walked. The hum followed. At the end, a heavy steel door. No lock, just a handle. He pushed, and found a room. It was round, circular, like a chamber built for listening. Speakers lined the walls. Wires spilled from the ceiling like veins. In the center, 3 chairs. Small, child-sized. Each one facing a different speaker. Each one occupied. But the girls weren't moving. They weren't bound. They were just sitting, eyes closed, breathing slow, as if they were listening. Marshall stepped forward. His heart slammed against his ribs. "Riley," he whispered. No reaction. He reached out, touched her shoulder. And she opened her eyes. Not frightened, not surprised, just calm. "He's almost done," she whispered. "Who?" Marshall asked. She looked toward the speaker and said, "The one who collects us." He turned. All 3 girls now had their eyes open. And from the walls, the whisper returned. "She's learning." Through them. Marshall stepped back. "What do you want?" The hum deepened. The lights flickered. And then the girls spoke. Together, in unison. "To be remembered." He pulled his radio. "Unit 12, this is Marshall. I need immediate backup at the old transmission tower, lower chamber. 3 subjects located. All alive." Static. Then another voice. Not his dispatch. "There is no Unit 12. Then silence. He grabbed the girls one by one, led them out, back up the staircase into the cold. As they emerged, the storm broke, wind snapping through the trees, snow whipping like ash. And behind them, the tower caught fire. No one could explain it. There were no heat sources, no sparks. But the steel glowed red, the tapes melted, the whispers gone. For now, that night the girls slept in the hospital, vitals steady. But none of them spoke again, not even to their parents. They just stared out the window, toward the lake, and hummed. Marshall sat in his car, unable to sleep. His radio was off, but the static remained, inside his mind, inside his chest. And just before dawn, he whispered to the dark, "I think she remembers me too. Sometimes silence is mercy. Because when the storm ends, the voices are all that remain." The storm had ended, but the lake didn't freeze again. That morning Carter Lake shimmered like glass black and still untouched by the snowfall that had blanketed the rest of Pine Hollow. As if the water had rejected the snow, as if it was waiting. Marshall stood at the shoreline, boots pressed to the frost, breath curling in the air. The wind was still, too still. Behind him, the search teams were gone. The tower was ash. And the 3 girls were safe but silent. Not traumatized, not drugged, just quiet, listening to something no one else could hear. He stepped onto the ice. 1 foot, then another. It didn't creak, didn't bend. It felt thicker now, thicker than before. But beneath it, shadows moved. Faint, long, slow, like something circling below the surface just beyond light. That's when he made the call. "Talia Reyes, I need you to help me find a chamber." By noon, they were standing at the edge of the lake, flanked by a sonar team, flown in under Marshall's own dime. She brought gear, real gear. infrared sensors, ground-penetrating radar, a hydrophone, the kind of things you use when you're not just looking for a body, but listening for a pattern. They drilled into the ice, lowered the sonar, static, then bounce, then a hollow, deep, wide, perfectly round, beneath the center of the lake. It shouldn't have been there. There were no documented caverns under Carter Lake, no sinkholes, no flood records, and yet, there it was, the chamber. They dropped the hydrophone, listened. At first nothing, then a hum, like metal under pressure, then a voice, Lucy's, I'm still here, then another, a different girl, 1970s maybe. It remembers everything. Then, a man's voice, broken, wet. Don't bring the light down here. Talia pulled off her headphones, pale. That's not a playback, that's live. Marshall whispered, then it's still open. They marked the spot, pulled coordinates, and by evening the dive was ready. But this time it wasn't Jules, it was Marshall. He suited up in silence. Dry suit, thermal lining, oxygen tanks, a tether line, body cam. And one more thing, a radio transmitter, tuned to 145.600 megahertz. In case the lake tried to speak, he lowered into the black. The cold hit first a silence so deep it pressed against his chest. His flashlight cut through the darkness, scattering silt like stars. 10 feet, 15, 20, and then a wall. Steel, curved, rusted over. The chamber. There was a hatch, old, sealed by pressure. He touched it. It opened. Inside, silence. The beam of his flashlight swept across the space, smooth metal walls, corroded wiring, and something far worse. Drawings, carved into the steel with nails or bone. Dozens of faces, girls, wide eyes, open mouths, some smiling, some screaming, and words etched in looping childlike scrawl. We're still here. She won't let us leave. Stop listening. Then a room. He floated in. In the center, a chair. Old, strapped to the floor. Behind it, a machine. Still humming. A reel-to-reel recorder submerged, sealed, but still spinning. He touched it. It stopped. And from the walls, the voice came. Soft, all around him. Not in English, not in any language. Just sound. Emotion. Grief. Longing. Then mimicry. His voice. Raymond. Then Lucy's. You found me. Then all of them. Join us? The lights on his suit flickered. The tether line trembled. He grabbed the tape from the machine, shoved it into his gear pouch, then turned and saw her, Lucy Amber, eyes open, floating right in front of him. Not bloated, not rotten, just still, preserved, mouth slightly open, hair drifting like ink. She reached toward him, and as she did, the ice above him cracked. A deep groan, the water shook. He kicked back, rising, fast, chest burning. He broke the surface, gasping, eyes wide. The lake was splitting behind him. Steam rose from the cracks, and beneath it, something moved. He scrambled out onto the shore. Talia pulled him to his feet. What did you see? She shouted. Marshall couldn't speak. He just handed her the tape and whispered, It's not haunting the lake. It is the lake. That night they played the tape. It didn't just contain voices. It contained memories. Snippets from the missing girls' lives, their homes, songs, lullabies, secrets, as if the lake had recorded them, copied them, stored them, and now it was remixing them into something new. Talia said the waveform looked different, organic. Ray, she whispered, this isn't a recording anymore. It's becoming a language. In the hospital, the three girls still wouldn't speak. But at exactly 2:17 a.m., they sat up and began humming, together. In perfect sync, outside the lake froze solid, perfectly still, perfectly flat, and below it, the whispers faded. For now, when ice cracks, it doesn't scream. It whispers, and beneath that whisper is memory with teeth. They say frequencies fade, that if you stop the transmission, the signal dies. But not this one, not hers. Marshall sat alone in the Pine Hollow Sheriff's Office at 3:03 a.m. The lights were off. The heater hummed low. A police radio crackled quietly beside him. In his lap, the reel-to-reel tape recovered from the chamber beneath Carter Lake. He hadn't played it since that night. Not fully, not out loud. Until now. He pressed play. At first a low hum, then a lullaby. The same lullaby Lucy used to hum in school. The same one the other girls picked up in their sleep. Then, her voice, "I'm still here." Then another, younger, "She speaks through us." And then a third, Marshall's own voice, "You shouldn't have come back." He stopped the tape. Something had changed. This wasn't a loop. It was a warning. And somewhere, someone was still broadcasting it. He returned to the last place that had spoken clearly, the burned remains of the old tower. The structure was gone, just black metal beams now poking into the gray sky like ribs. But beneath it, beneath the scorched wood and snow, was something untouched. A cable, running underground. Away from the lake. Marshall followed it. Across the ridge. Into the trees. All the way to a place that had long been forgotten. Bellhaven Relay Station, Site B. It was buried beneath earth and ice, a concrete bunker with no signs, no door handle, just a keypad. And carved into the stone beside it, faint but deliberate, "She listens." He didn't have a code, so he waited. For hours. Until 2:17 a.m. And at that exact moment, the door unlocked. Inside a narrow hallway, lit by flickering emergency bulbs. Dust choked the air. Cables hung like veins from the ceiling. The hum of ancient machinery vibrated softly through the floor. He moved slowly, deeper into the dark, until he found it. A broadcast room, still operational. Monitors, analog switchboards, an old transmission console still powered, still blinking. And in the center, a figure. The man sat with his back turned, old, thin, still, wearing a headset, fingers resting lightly on the dials. Marshall stepped forward. "Who are you?" The man didn't move. So Marshall reached out and gently turned the chair around. The headset fell. The body slumped. The man was dead. Had been for years. But the console was still transmitting. On a loop. A voice. Lucy's. "I remember the ice." Then Valerie Kent. "We're not alone." Then a new voice. Not a girl. Not human. Low. Ragged. "You're listening, and that's how I grow." Marshall backed away. Heart pounding. This wasn't a person. Not anymore. It was a process. A signal. Sent out. Absorbed. Reflected. Fed by memory. He reached for the master switch. And paused. Because on the main monitor, a live feed flickered on. Of the lake. Of the ice. And something beneath it. Moving. Shifting. Rising. A voice filled the room. Soft. Behind him. Not from the speakers. From the wall. If you turn it off, you'll never hear her scream again. He turned, but no one was there. Only a mirror. Cracked. And in the reflection, a girl. Lucy. Standing behind him. Eyes glassy, lips parted, mouth moving. But no sound. Marshall stared. Froze. Then reached toward the console and yanked the power. The screens went black. The hum stopped. The mirror cracked further, and the girl was gone. He stood in the silence. Alone, finally. But outside, the wind howled. Not like weather, like anger. And far beneath the ground, the chamber trembled. Back in town, the girls stirred in their hospital beds. For the first time in days, they blinked, sat up, looked around, and whispered all at once, "She's cold now." Talia called that night. "I traced the final signal," she said. "It's dead. There's no more frequency bleed." "You're sure?" Marshall asked. "I'm sure," she said. "You stopped the broadcast." He nodded, but said nothing, because deep down, he knew. The voice hadn't needed the equipment. It had used it. And now, it had learned to live without it. He walked one last time to Carter Lake. The surface was solid, quiet, still. But beneath it, he imagined the voices, waiting, resting. And in the wind, one last echo. "Next time, you'll listen better. Some transmissions don't end with static. They end with silence. And in that silence, something waits to speak again." It ended in silence. No signal, no broadcast. No voice beneath the ice, just quiet. But silence is a funny thing. It's not the absence of sound, it's the waiting for it. 3 weeks after the tower went dark, Marshall left Pine Hollow. No press release, no report. Just a single item handed to the sheriff before he drove away. One tape, labeled in his own handwriting. Play only if she returns. He moved to a cabin 2 states away. Remote, untouched, no radio, no phone, just snow, trees, and quiet. But the quiet didn't help, because even in stillness, she whispered. Sometimes it was Lucy's voice, soft, behind the wall. You found me too late. Other times it was his own. She's learning your name. And on the worst nights when the wind was just wrong enough, the lake whispered, from inside his dreams. He began recording again, not for the case, not for evidence, for himself. Each night before bed, he'd sit at the edge of his bed, press record, and whisper into the microphone. Day 6, heard her again, this time in the pipes. Same phrase, come back. Same time, verse 17. Day 11, dreamt of the ice, I was under it. Couldn't breathe, but she could. She smiled. Day 14, no voice, no hum, just a child laughing. From inside the floor, he played them back during the day. Nothing on them, just static. But on day 30, he heard it. It wasn't on the tape. It was on the playback. A whisper layered beneath his own voice. You're not alone here. He burned the tapes. Everyone. Smashed the recorder. But it didn't stop. Because she wasn't in the tapes. She was in him. Meanwhile, back in Pine Hollow, the lake froze again. Solid, smooth, like nothing had ever broken. The girls recovered. One moved away. One never spoke again. The youngest, Mia, drew pictures of a girl under the ice, smiling. With her hand pressed up to the glass, the sheriff kept the tape Marshall left. Never played it. Locked it in the archives. But he never slept well after that. Because sometimes around 2 to 17 a.m., his office radio would flicker to life. No signal, just static. And just beneath it, a lullaby. They fenced off Carter Lake, declared it unsafe. But kids still went. On dares, made in whispers. And some nights, when the moon hits just right, you can see shapes moving beneath. Not fish, not current, just memories. And what of Marshall? No one knows. He disappeared 6 months after leaving town. Some say he went off the grid. Some say he drowned in a lake that wasn't on any map. But those who believe in whispers know he left one last recording. A neighbor found it, taped to the inside of his cabin wall, a reel, and a note. If she starts whispering again, don't listen. Let her forget. They never played the tape, but the neighbor's son did. One night, alone, and the next morning, he was gone. Now the voice travels without a lake. It doesn't need ice, only ears, only someone to press play. So if you're hearing this tonight, ask yourself, is it really just a story? Or did something inside you already recognize the hum? Because voices don't die. They echo. And some echoes don't end. You stop the tape. But the whisper, she's already inside. This was the final episode of Voices from the Frozen Lake. But in the stillness between stories, she may find you. Thank you for listening to Midnight Crime Stories. Subscribe for more whispered true crime tales to accompany your sleepless nights.